All right, so today we're going to be diving deep into protein on the ketogenic diet.
Okay.
And we've got three sources here to help us unpack this. Perfect Keto, Diet Doctor, and Carb Manager.
Sounds good.
You know, I feel like a lot of people have questions about how much protein is enough on keto.
Right.
Can you have too much protein? Can it affect your blood sugar level?
Yeah, for sure.
So we're going to figure all that out today.
Yeah, one of the things that's so interesting to me about protein on keto is just how many myths surround it.
Yeah.
Like people get so nervous about getting the right amount and worrying that like maybe they'll be kicked out of ketosis if they have too much. And it's all a bit more nuanced than that, I think.
Yeah, so let's clear the air right away.
Okay.
What is the big deal with protein, especially when we're talking about keto?
Well, I mean, protein's not just some like fad ingredient, This is like literally one of the fundamental building blocks of your body.
Right.
It's made up of these things called amino acids, and they do a ton of important jobs. Like it helps your muscles grow and repair. It's involved in making hormones and enzymes, and even helps to keep your skin, hair, and bones healthy.
Okay, so it's important in general, but why is it so crucial for those following keto and trying to lose weight?
Well, here's where it gets really interesting,
Okay.
Protein is really a weight loss ally because it digests slowly,
Okay.
which means that you stay fuller for longer, and those cravings don't hit you quite as hard.
So it helps prevent, like, the dreaded hanger?
Exactly.
I'm on board with that.
And on top of that, your body actually burns more calories digesting protein compared to carbs or fats.
Oh, wow.
So it's like a built-in metabolism booster.
Nice. All right.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see why protein gets so much attention.
Yeah.
But how much do we actually need on keto?
Right.
Because I see all these different recommendations, and it gets confusing.
You're absolutely right. The recommendations can feel like a bit of a maze, so let's try to map it out a little. So both Perfect Keto and Diet Doctor suggest aiming for 1.2 to 2.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight.
I'm already lost in the metric system.
Okay, no worries.
Is there a simpler way to figure this out?
Yeah, they've got you covered.
Okay.
Both those sources actually have these handy charts
Okay.
that show you the minimum protein based on your height and gender.
Oh, nice.
So no complicated calculations needed.
I love a good visual.
Yeah.
Now, what about Carb Manager? What do they recommend?
So Carb Manager goes with a percentage instead of that.
Okay.
So they recommend 20 to 25% of your daily calories come from protein,
Gotcha.
which actually aligns pretty well with a lot of the kind of standard keto guidelines.
Okay.
But they also make a good point about personalizing your protein intake based on what you're trying to achieve with keto.
So it's not like a one-size-fits-all situation.
Exactly. Yeah, one size does not fit all. For example, Diet Doctor talks about adjusting your protein based on whether you want to lose fat, build muscle, your age, how active you are, or even if you're using keto for therapeutic reasons.
Wow, so many factors.
They even recommend making sure each meal has at least 20 grams of protein
Okay.
to help you stay feeling full
Yeah.
and to support muscle growth.
So it's about the total amount and also how you space it out throughout the day.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about this whole thing about too much protein kicking you out of ketosis?
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are worried about that.
Right. That fear comes from a process called gluconeogenesis,
Okay.
often shortened to GNG.
Okay.
And it's basically your body converting protein into glucose when it needs to.
Wait a minute. I thought the whole point of keto was to avoid glucose.
Right?
Why would my body be doing that?
Well, it's not as crazy as it sounds.
Right.
Even on keto, your body needs a little bit of glucose for certain things,
Okay.
like red blood cells.
Okay.
Some parts of the brain, they still rely on it.
Okay.
So gluconeogenesis kind of makes sure they get what they need.
So it's like a backup system.
Yeah,
Keeping the essential functions running,
exactly.
even if I'm not eating carbs. Yeah.
Exactly. And all three of our sources agree that GNG is totally normal and
Yeah.
essential, even on keto.
Okay, that's good to know.
And they emphasize that eating protein within the recommended amounts won't stop you from being in ketosis.
Okay.
Your body is smart. It only produces the necessary glucose, and it keeps using ketones for energy.
Okay, that's a relief.
Yeah.
But I do remember Perfect Keto mentioning that too much protein might potentially be an issue.
Yeah, they did bring that up.
Right.
They stress that it's mostly a concern for people with type 1 diabetes,
Okay.
who are often more sensitive to protein's effects on blood sugar.
Go.
But for most people on keto, sticking to those guidelines should be just fine.
So it's all about finding that protein sweet spot that works for you.
Exactly.
Speaking of individual needs,
Yeah,
are there certain people who might need more protein on keto?
absolutely.
Okay.
All of our sources highlight a few groups.
Okay.
People who are losing weight and wanting to hold on to their muscle,
Oh, yeah.
people dealing with slow wound healing,
Okay.
older adults,
Okay.
and even individuals managing type 2 diabetes
Okay.
or cardiovascular issues.
So that's a pretty diverse group.
It is.
What's the thinking behind those needing more protein?
Well, if you're losing weight,
Okay.
and you're in a calorie deficit, your body might start breaking down muscle for energy,
Right.
which is not what we want.
Yeah.
More protein can help to kind of protect that hard-earned muscle
Yeah.
and keep your metabolism humming along.
So it's like giving your body the right fuel to avoid burning the furniture for warmth.
That's a great analogy.
Like,
And there's actually science behind that.
okay.
Carb Manager mentions studies showing that more protein, especially when it's combined with resistance training, can help you maintain or even build muscle while you're cutting calories.
So lifting those weights is just as important as what you're putting on your plate.
Absolutely.
Now, what about wound healing?
Yeah.
What role does protein play there?
So protein is essential for tissue repair.
Okay.
It's like the construction crew for your body.
Okay.
So if you've got an injury or you're recovering from surgery,
Yeah.
you're going to need more protein to rebuild and heal properly.
Okay.
Carb Manager says that experts recommend 1 to 3 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight for this,
Wow.
which is a significant bump from our earlier recommendations.
So if I've got a cut or I'm recovering from surgery,
Mhm.
making sure I'm getting enough protein can really speed up the healing process.
Absolutely.
I had no idea it was that important.
It is, and it applies to all kinds of wounds,
Wow.
even those tricky diabetic ulcers.
Wow, it's good to know.
Yeah, and then as we age,
Yeah.
we naturally start losing muscle mass,
Uh-huh.
which can lead to all sorts of problems. That's where protein comes in again.
Okay.
Both Carb Manager and Diet Doctor stress how vital protein is for older adults
Yep.
to combat this muscle loss,
Uh-huh.
which is known as sarcopenia.
Sarcopenia.
Yeah.
I've never heard that term before.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful,
Yeah.
but it's a serious issue.
Yeah.
Increases the risk of falls and fractures,
Wow.
which can be devastating for older adults.
Right.
So Carb Manager recommends aiming for at least 20% of daily calories from protein
Okay.
to maintain muscle mass and keep those bodies moving well.
So it sounds like older adults need to be even more mindful of their protein intake than younger people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, now what about those with type 2 diabetes or heart issues?
Right.
What's the connection with protein for them?
Well, this is where things get really fascinating.
Okay.
So Carb Manager cites a 2006 study
Okay.
that showed that a high-protein diet,
Uh-huh.
where about 30% of the calories were coming from protein,
Okay.
was effective in improving blood sugar control and insulin sensitivity in men with type 2 diabetes.
Hold on. So you're telling me more protein can actually be helpful for managing blood sugar?
Uh-huh.
That's the opposite of what I would have thought.
It's counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
And they reference another study from 2017
Okay.
that showed a link between higher protein intake
Ah.
and improvements in cardiovascular risk factors,
Okay.
like blood pressure and cholesterol levels
Wow.
in both kids and adults.
So more protein could be a double win.
Yeah.
For those dealing with type 2 diabetes or heart concerns,
It could.
this is some seriously valuable information.
It really is.
Yeah.
And speaking of surprises,
Okay.
let's revisit this whole gluconeogenesis thing. I know we touched on it briefly,
Yeah.
but I think it deserves a bit more unpacking,
Yep.
given how much confusion it causes.
Yeah, it seems like everyone's terrified of gluconeogenesis,
Right.
thinking it's going to sabotage their keto journey.
Exactly. So
About that.
I think that fear is totally understandable, but let's try to demystify it a little bit.
Okay.
So gluconeogenesis is basically your body's way of making glucose
Okay.
from non-carb sources,
Okay.
primarily amino acids from protein.
Okay.
It mainly happens in the liver
Okay.
and the kidneys.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around this.
Oh, yeah.
If we're avoiding carbs and trying to minimize glucose on keto,
Yeah.
why would our bodies even bother making more?
Right.
It seems counterproductive.
It might seem that way, but gluconeogenesis is actually a vital process
Okay.
that keeps your body running smoothly even when you're restricting carbs.
Okay.
Remember those red blood cells and parts of the brain we talked about?
Yeah.
They need glucose to function,
Yeah.
and gluconeogenesis makes sure they get it.
So it's like the body's backup generator,
Uh-huh.
ensuring essential functions have power even if the main source is off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And all of our sources, Perfect, Keto, Diet Doctor, and Carb Manager, make it clear that gluconeogenesis isn't the enemy.
Okay.
It's a natural, necessary process. That helps regulate your blood sugar and provide glucose when and where it's needed.
Okay, so it's not about eliminating gluconeogenesis altogether.
Right.
It's about understanding what it is and why it's actually important.
Precisely.
Okay.
And here's another interesting point. Even when you're in ketosis and your body is primarily burning fat for fuel, gluconeogenesis is still happening.
Okay.
Your body is constantly regulating your blood sugar and making small amounts of glucose to meet those essential needs, regardless of what you eat.
So even if I ate absolutely zero protein, my body would still be making some glucose through gluconeogenesis.
That's right.
Wow.
Your body is incredibly adaptable.
Yeah.
It'll find ways to get the glucose it needs, even if you're not eating carbs directly.
It's pretty amazing.
It is. It's pretty amazing.
So all this fear-mongering about protein causing blood sugar spikes and kicking you out of ketosis is mostly overblown.
For most people, absolutely. Carb Manager even highlights studies showing that extra protein doesn't automatically lead to more glucose production through gluconeogenesis.
That's incredibly reassuring.
Yeah.
But I imagine there are some exceptions, right?
There are, as we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Individuals with type 1 diabetes might be more sensitive to protein's impact on blood sugar.
Okay.
And need to be a bit more cautious with their intake.
That makes sense, considering their bodies don't produce insulin.
Yeah.
Which is crucial for blood sugar regulation.
Exactly.
So anyone with underlying health conditions should definitely consult with their doctor or a registered dietitian.
Absolutely.
Now let's switch gears for a moment and talk about athletes.
Okay.
We know protein is key for muscle growth and repair.
Yeah.
But do athletes on keto need even more protein?
Right.
Especially if they're training hard.
That's a question I bet a lot of people are curious about.
Yeah, what do the experts have to say about that?
Well, interestingly enough, both Carb Manager and Diet Doctor actually suggest that even elite athletes don't necessarily need to go overboard on protein.
Okay, so there's a limit to how much protein our bodies can actually use, even when we're pushing ourselves in the gym.
Exactly.
Okay.
And Carb Manager actually references a fascinating study from the 1980s that followed elite bodybuilders who were training 90 minutes a day, 6 days a week.
That's a lot.
Even with that insane level of activity, they found that the upper limit for protein intake to benefit body composition was around 1.65 grams per kilogram of body weight.
Wow, that's a lot of iron pumping.
Right.
But it's fascinating that even at that level, more protein doesn't automatically equal more muscle.
It's a good reminder that there's a sweet spot for everything.
Yeah.
It's also worth noting that this study looked at athletes who were maintaining their weight.
Okay.
So if you're an athlete who's trying to lose weight or cut body fat, you might need to adjust your protein accordingly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for athletes following keto, sticking to that 1.6 to 2.0 gram per kilogram range seems like a good starting point.
I think it's a solid place to begin.
Okay.
But as always, listening to your body, understanding your individual needs, and consulting with a qualified sports nutritionist or healthcare professional is key.
Great advice. We've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
From the science of protein on keto to busting those gluconeogenesis myths.
It's a lot.
But let's get practical.
Okay.
How do we translate these protein targets and recommendations into real life?
That's the million-dollar question, right? We've got all this knowledge about protein, but how do we actually make it work for us day to day?
Right, exactly.
Well, the good news is hitting your protein goals on keto doesn't have to be like a complicated science project.
Okay, good.
All of our sources offer some really practical tips that I think can make a big difference.
Okay, I'm all ears. All right, so first up,
both Perfect Keto and Diet Doctor emphasize the power of simple visual cues for portioning protein.
Okay.
So Perfect Keto, for example, points out that a piece of meat about the size of a deck of cards is roughly 20 grams of protein.
Oh, that's a great visual.
Right.
Yeah.
So if your goal is, let's say, 80 grams of protein per day, you could aim for like 4 decks of cards worth of protein spread throughout the day.
Okay, easy.
And Diet Doctor, they suggest aiming for at least 20 grams of protein per meal.
Okay.
Which you can usually kind of eyeball with a palm-sized portion.
Okay, that makes sense.
Of protein.
So whether it's a deck of cards or the palm of my hand.
Right.
I've got some handy tools
Exactly.
for estimating those portion sizes without having to pull out measuring cups and spoons.
Exactly. No one wants to do that.
Yeah, no thank you.
Are there any other tips that you think can help us stay on track?
Absolutely.
So both sources stress the importance of spreading your protein intake evenly throughout the day. Perfect Keto notes that protein is very satiating.
Yeah.
So trying to cram all your protein into one meal can be a recipe for discomfort.
Right.
Especially if you're doing something like intermittent fasting.
Oh, I've totally been there, trying to force down a giant steak at dinner.
Oh, yeah.
Because I didn't eat enough protein earlier in the day.
Right.
Not a fun experience.
No, not at all.
So spacing it out is key.
Spacing it out is key.
Okay, what about those times when you just need a little extra protein boost?
Yeah.
Any suggestions for that?
So Perfect Keto recommends strategically incorporating nuts, seeds, and cheese.
Okay.
Now, while those shouldn't be your main protein sources,
Okay,
because they can be pretty calorie dense,
okay,
they're great for kind of topping up your protein intake.
yeah,
So think like a handful of almonds as a snack,
okay.
or a sprinkle of chia seeds on your salad.
I love those little easy additions.
Yeah, they're easy to add in.
But what if you need like a more significant protein boost?
Yeah.
Like if you're an athlete or recovering from an injury?
Yeah, in those cases, Perfect Keto suggests turning to meat and protein powder.
Okay.
So adding an extra serving of meat to your meals,
Okay.
or having a protein shake can really help you hit those goals without needing to drastically overhaul your whole meal plan.
So a hearty chicken breast or a protein smoothie can be a real lifesaver when you're feeling protein deficient.
Absolutely.
What about those who are super meticulous about tracking their macros?
Right.
Any advice for them?
If you're all about that precision,
Yeah.
Perfect Keto recommends investing in a food scale.
Yeah.
To really get super accurate with your protein intake.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
For those who are really into tracking every gram,
Right.
but for those of us who prefer like a more relaxed approach,
Right.
those visual cues and general guidelines are a great place to start.
Absolutely.
Before we wrap things up, let's talk about one last concern that often comes up around protein. Does it affect blood sugar levels?
It's a great question, and I think the answer, like many things in nutrition, isn't a simple yes or no.
Okay.
Perfect Keto explains that while protein can slightly increase blood sugar levels in certain situations, it's generally not a major issue.
Okay, good.
And they highlight a few key points that I think are helpful to understand.
Okay, I'm all ears.
So first, they point out that on a ketogenic diet, or as part of like a low-carb meal, protein may slightly elevate blood sugar through that process of gluconeogenesis, but this increase is usually pretty minimal. And it doesn't cause those drastic blood sugar spikes that we see with carbs.
So it reinforces what we talked about earlier.
Right.
Gluconeogenesis is a normal process that's happening all the time. And a little extra protein isn't going to throw things off too much.
Exactly.
Okay, good.
Second, Perfect Keto notes that researchers have actually observed more significant blood sugar increases after large protein-only meals in people with type 1 diabetes.
So for those individuals, working with a healthcare professional to determine their ideal protein intake is going to be really essential.
That's a good reminder that personalized guidance is so important.
Yeah.
Especially when dealing with specific health conditions.
Absolutely.
What else does Perfect Keto say about protein and blood sugar?
So the third point I think is particularly interesting.
Okay.
They highlight that when protein is included in mixed meals that also contain carbohydrates, it can actually help to reduce blood sugar spikes.
Oh, interesting.
Which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Because the protein slows down digestion. Which in turn slows the rate at which those carbs are broken down into sugar and absorbed into the bloodstream.
So combining protein with carbs can actually help keep those blood sugar levels more stable.
Exactly.
That's really valuable to know.
It is.
Yeah.
It really highlights the importance of balance.
Yeah.
And understanding how different nutrients interact in the body. Right, we can't look at things in isolation.
Exactly.
I love how practical this all is.
Yeah.
I feel like we've really demystified protein and keto as we wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah.
What are the key takeaways you want our listeners to walk away with?
Well, I think the most important point is to remember that protein is essential on a ketogenic diet. It plays such a vital role in so many bodily functions.
Yeah.
You know, from muscle growth and repair to hormone production and maintaining healthy skin, hair, and bones.
And we can't forget its incredible benefits for weight loss.
Right.
Keeping you feeling full, boosting your metabolism, and helping you hold on to muscle while you're losing fat.
Exactly. When it comes to how much protein you need, that 1.2 to 2.0 grams per kilogram of body weight, or around 20 to 25% of your daily calories from protein, is a good starting point.
Yeah. But we also learned that those needs can vary based on things like your age, how active you are, and what you're trying to achieve with keto.
Exactly. And while that whole gluconeogenesis thing might sound scary, it's actually a normal, essential process that helps regulate blood sugar and ensures your body gets the glucose it needs even when you're restricting carbs.
So don't fear protein.
Yeah.
Just make sure you're choosing high-quality sources, spreading your protein intake throughout the day, and paying attention to what your body's telling you.
Those are all excellent points to remember.
Okay.
Now, here's a final thought-provoking question for our listeners.
Okay.
If protein is so crucial for muscle health, metabolic function, and overall well-being, could prioritizing high-quality protein sources benefit everyone?
Okay.
Even those who aren't following a ketogenic diet? It's something to ponder.
Oh, that's a great question to leave our listeners with. Food for thought indeed.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into protein and keto.
Of course.
We encourage you to continue exploring, experimenting, and discovering what works best for you on your health journey.
Absolutely. And remember, knowledge is power. So keep those brains fueled with curiosity and those bodies fueled with delicious, nutritious foods.
Until next time, happy learning, everyone.